Hi everyone, Big Seven here. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy the content, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for future NFL videos. If you don't, leave a comment down below and let me know how I can improve. Today I'm going to be looking at the Draftstars NFL main slate for Monday. It's a $50,000 comp with that'd be 13 matches in there. Expected to be nearly 4,000 entries, top prize of $5,000. Really looking to finish in the top 30 to get anything substantial. And as such, we need to build teams in that kind of fashion. So what I'm trying to do when I'm building my team is build a mixture of upside, and the upside normally comes through stacking players together that will correlate well. So that's generally a quarterback with a couple of their wide receivers. So, for example, if you liked Kansas City, you would go Patrick Mahomes. You could mix him with Travis Kelce, Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a couple of those. And then you can also have guys in that same matchup. So you're basically building a team as if that game's going to be a shootout. So they're playing Arizona this week. So if you were doing that, you would be maybe going Mahomes with your quarterback. So yeah, probably going Mahomes with your quarterback, wide receiver, maybe a Marquez Valdes-Scantling with a tight end, and then going back the other way, you want to pick players in that same matchup and hope that that game really blows out. So you could go for Marquise Brown, and you might even want to throw in a Zach Ertz in the flex. And so you've got 4 or 5 players from that matchup, where if that matchup becomes a blowout, then you've got all of these high-scoring players that'll correlate well together and give your team that ceiling to be able to compete for those top-level prizes. Because if we go back to that, and yeah, you can build a team that finishes 400 or 500, and you're only getting double your money back. And yeah, if you're getting 4,000 entries, you don't really want to be finishing in that top 25% only to double your money. You really want to be shooting for the moon. So with that in mind, I'm going to go through my favorite stacks and my favorite stacks for this week, and then after that, I'm going to go through my favorite picks that I think are value. So these aren't stack dependent. So as mentioned, probably on the right hand side we have the expected points that each team will get according to the bookies. So in that first game, we can see Atlanta and New Orleans, not a really high-scoring game. Same with Carolina and Cleveland. Chicago and San Fran, that's also expected to be low-scoring. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh could potentially be a game to target. I'm personally not really looking at that game because some of those division games can be pretty low-scoring. Detroit and Philadelphia, if you're buying into the Jalen Hurts hype, then that's definitely a game to target. I think that could be a nice game. Houston and Indianapolis, I think that's a pretty underrated game to be looking at. I don't mind Davis Mills. He started to look better towards the second half of last year. And the Colts do Colts things, so that could be a game to target. Miami and New England, I'm not sold on either of these two teams, to be honest. I'm thinking I will have limited exposure to that game. The Jets and Baltimore are clear favorites in that. If Baltimore starts scoring a lot, I don't expect Joe Flacco at quarterback to be able to keep up with them. But I do think Baltimore players are an option this week. Washington and Jacksonville, probably not for mine. It's a fairly low total. If there's a couple of players you like out of that, like a Travis Etienne, then I don't mind him. And then you've got the three big games all in the late slot. Arizona and Kansas City, which mentioned before, equal highest expected points in that game, and some good options from both teams to pick. You've got the Chargers in Las Vegas. That was obviously a really great game to watch as a neutral last year. That one should be a close game. Maybe we get overtime again. And it's in shootout division. So I think that's a pretty obvious game to be targeting. Minnesota and Green Bay, fairly high total. But I really like how this game could go. Again, it's expected to be close and high scoring, so could see overtime. And then the last game, Tennessee and New York Giants. Not really a fan of this game. So with that in mind, I will go through my top 5 stacks. And I've actually already got the first one here, the example I was talking about before. So I do like Patrick Mahomes, but I think Kyler is just a little bit more value. So if you compare the two, Kyler's about $600 cheaper. I mean, you could go either way at quarterback. It wouldn't be game breaking to fade Mahomes for Kyler or Kyler for Mahomes, I don't think. In terms of wide receivers, I'm pretty keen to fade Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm just not convinced that he's going to be the one. He's never been the one in his career. In terms of Kansas City wide receiver, I do like Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think he will be Patrick Mahomes' main wide receiver, if not his second. And to get someone as involved as I think MVS will be in a high-scoring game, I think that 8,690 is fairly cheap price. And then you've obviously got Travis Kelce. If you compare him to the rest of the tight ends, he is a fair bit cheaper, a fair bit more expensive than the rest of them. But you are paying up for quality, and other teams might struggle to get up to that price. And you're going to get what you're paying for with Kelce. I really don't mind that play. On to Arizona. And you could, if you wanted to, you could go Patrick Mahomes and a Chiefs stack and then go James Conner as one of your running backs to go back the other way. I don't mind it, but I think with DeAndre Hopkins missing, Kyler will be focusing towards the two targets in Marquise Brown and Zach Ertz. I think they represent pretty good value at their price points. But there's also AJ Green, who started last year pretty well, if I remember correctly. And also Rondale Moore, who could have a role in the offense. I don't think Rondale or AJ Green are locks by any means, but they could be differentials within the stack that could deliver you the dub. And so onto the fourth matchup. And I alluded to it before. I said it was a bit underrated. But it's going to be Indianapolis and Houston. And if you're comparing the quarterbacks to other positions, and you're getting a discount on Fields, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Winston, even Wentz, and you can pick Matt Ryan up at 11,500. The risk with picking up Matty Ice is that they've obviously got a pretty prolific running back in Jonathan Taylor. And last year, Jonathan Taylor went for 140 yards each game against the Texans. So I think Jonathan Taylor is a really solid pick in this matchup. And if you are stacking players, you normally don't want to stack a quarterback with a running back. So for that reason, I do like the value on Davis Mills. He's dark mode's given him a pretty scary face, but I don't think he's a scary option. He's the second cheapest starting quarterback, and you would expect them to be behind for most of the game. So with that in mind, that leads the game script to be force them to be passing more. So I like a Davis Mills stack here, nice and cheap, which will enable you to go Jonathan Taylor. You might even be able to go Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey up the top if you can get cheap enough in other positions. In terms of a running back for Houston, there has been a lot of hype around Dameon Pierce. It does look like he's going to be the lead back in that committee, but it's still going to be a committee, and they will probably be behind the eight ball for most of the game. So I think he is an option, especially at that basement price for a running back. But he's not someone I'm looking to force in. So if you are going the Davis Mills stack, that leads you to be able to pick Brandon Cooks, who's been a top 20 wide receiver for like the past 4 or 5 years, I'm pretty sure. And you're getting him at 10,500, which, if you're looking in a similar price range, Hunter Renfrow, Alan Lazard, Michael Thomas, Deontay Johnson, and he can match it with these guys, and I think he can even go better than the guys around his price range. So I'm pretty content to go a Texans stack. I would only be looking to go Mills and Cooks. Nico Collins has got a bit of hype in the off season, but not really one for me. Tight end, I don't even know who they're going to put out at tight end. Could be OJ Howard, who they just signed off fairly recently. If you are going the Houston stack, I think you're just stacking these two players and you're getting a Colt or two to go alongside them. So as mentioned before, you've got Jonathan Taylor at running back, just a really solid option, and has smashed Houston in the past. Michael Pittman is the other one that is another premium that has got a lot of hype in the preseason. It'll be interesting to see what the balance is in Indianapolis this year between the run and the pass. But Michael Pittman is one that is expected to break out, and he could make a mockery of this 12,000 price tag. And then for the other wide receivers, you've got Paris Campbell, who there's been hype around him every year, and he just doesn't stay healthy. But still, at the 6.5 price tag, he's definitely, I think, worth a punt if you're going to go the Houston stack to go against it. So you could go a Pittman Campbell, or you could go a Taylor Campbell or a Taylor Pittman. I think those are the three guys that I'm looking for. You could play all three, but I think it's probably a bit overkill. And the other one that has been talked about in preseason is Alec Pierce. I'm not 100% convinced on him. It seems like he'll be the third option to start. And if it's going to be a runish heavy offense, then he is an avoid, I think. And then the third best stack, in my opinion, I wasn't really sure. When I first looked at the pricing, I wasn't really sure about this guy because I thought he was priced up pretty high. But the more I looked at it, the more I looked into it, the more I bought into the hype. It's Trey season. He gets a really easy matchup to start. Chicago have in the past been bad offensively and decent defensively. Doesn't even seem like they're going to be decent defensively this year either. I think it's just going to be a train wreck in Chicago, unfortunately, for the Bears fans. So I think Trey as the eighth most expensive QB out of this bunch, he, I think he is a bit undervalued for mine. In the games he played last year, he was able to produce premium numbers. So I'm not too worried about that up against the Bears. In terms of 49ers to stack with, the one that seemed obvious was George Kittle, but I'm actually going to avoid him. In the games that Trey did play last year, Kittle didn't go above 10 points, and I think he will be more of a blocking tight end this year rather than a receiving one. So I'm avoiding Kittle. And then the two wide receivers, the two most expensive wide receivers, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, are both in play for me. I think I would probably stack both, or just need to have at least one of them, but I think stacking both could give you dividends. The other 49ers player that could be relevant is Elijah Mitchell. He's at 10K, so he's only a couple thousand more than basement price. But you do wonder if how much he will be utilized. You just never know with the 49ers. If they're going to commit to a starting guy, he should be the starter. It could be a game where he eats, but I'm happy to sit without him, go for the other Niners value in Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel at this point in time. And in terms of players going back the other way, it really just depends how you think the game's going to play out. If you think it's just going to be a Niners route, which it very well could be, you could just go Niners players only. I do like Darnell Mooney, though. He's under 10K for some reason, and he finished last year pretty strongly with Fields. He's clearly Fields' number one guy and effectively his only good target. Coming in at under 10K, I'm pretty happy to slot him in to my 49ers stacks to have someone going back the other way. I do wonder how good Chicago will end up being, but I'm happy to take the risk on Darnell. He's got a lot of talent, that boy. The second best stack, this could even be my favorite stack by Monday morning, but it is Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. So they've got a new head coach down in Minnesota, Kevin O'Connell, who has stated his desire to use the passing offense more than he has. And so that means that, sorry. Yeah, so Kirk Cousins, ninth best QB by price on this list. But I think he could be in for a really big season if they're going to throw the ball a lot, which it sounds like they're going to do. And he's got two very elite weapons in the passing game to help with that. Justin Jefferson had an amazing debut season last year. He could be the number one wide receiver in the NFL this year. It's probably between him and Kupp for me. And so 15,800, it seems like a lot, but honestly, I think he could get up to 17, 18,000 in other games this year. So I'm pretty happy to... It seems like a lot, but I think that's still a bit of a discount on Justin Jefferson. I'm pretty happy to slot in Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson together. And then also mentioned Adam Thielen in the same matchup. He's a little bit pricey at 11K. There might be some better options value-wise, like DJ Moore, Hollywood Brown, Rashad Bateman, Brandon Cooks. But the thing with the stack is you're betting on the offense to do well. And if Adam Thielen goes off, and that means Kirk Cousins will go off. If Kirk Cousins goes off, then Justin Jefferson probably has a big game as well. So I'm pretty happy It might not be the most value, but I'm happy having a Kirk, Jefferson, Thielen stack. Going back the other way, it's also very interesting because Green Bay have lost a lot. They've lost a lot on their offense. They obviously used to have Devontae Adams. He is now at the Raiders. Alan Lazard was meant to be the number one guy. It sounds like he's questionable and probably not going to play. So that means Sammy Watkins is probably going to be the number one wide receiver. And at 8K, or just under 8K in a high scoring contest, that's almost a lock for me if he ends up being the number one wide receiver. You've also got Romeo Dobbs, I think is the pronunciation. There's been a lot of hype around him preseason. I still, just from what I've seen, he still looks a little bit raw. I don't think he's going to be making an instant impact into the offense. Probably someone that'll peak towards the middle back half of the year. So for me, I'm taking Sammy Watkins. I'm not going to bother with a Green Bay stack going the other way. I think I think Minnesota have just got the better options to have the quarterback and the wide receivers, and then the Green Bay players are nice complements. And so I mentioned Sammy Watkins, and I also am a big fan of AJ Dillon. AJ Dillon was producing, I think, just outside the top 20 as a running back last year, and Aaron Rodgers with less weapons means that I think Green Bay go from a more passing offense to they were more of a balanced offense last year. I think they heavily rely on the run game this year. AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones are both very good running backs in their own right. I think AJ Dillon will take more of the groundwork and Aaron Jones will be more of a pass catching role. There'll be scenarios where they're both on the field, especially in this game if Lazard doesn't get up. So I'm pretty happy to take AJ Dillon at 9,200. I think he's got a fairly solid floor, but he's also got the touchdown ceiling to be able to boom. Aaron Jones, I think he is an option, but I think I prefer the 4,500 discount to be able to get AJ Dillon. And then if you're building this kind of team, that would lend you to be able to get, someone like a Kamara. Tight end, I actually didn't mention for this game. I think you've got a couple of really interesting options here. Irv Smith, there was a lot of hype around him before he got injured last year. I think he did his ACL. Comes in at 7,400, so it's a couple of thousand above basement. He could be an option, especially now that they're going to air the ball out more. I think he could be a really underrated option here. And the other one who has definitely slipped under a lot of radars, I think, is Robert Tonyan. He didn't have the greatest of years last year, but the year before, I think he was about the 8th or ninth best tight end. A lot of it was touchdown dependent. But with not many targets in this offense anymore, he could have a bit of a resurgence this year. So I don't mind picking Robert Tonyan at the 5K price point. And then if you did that, and the team basically fills out itself, you can take a elite defense and, someone, you could go Jonathan Taylor and a Philadelphia Eagles, for example, and that to me just looks like that could win. And then onto the last stack, probably the most obvious stack on the slate, which means it'll probably be higher owned, but I don't care. I like this Las Vegas and Chargers game. At quarterback, you've got the most expensive quarterback in Justin Herbert. He's predicted to be the season leader in passing yards, front runner for MVP. I'm happy to pay up for him. But Derek Carr is just always underrated, I think. And again, if you look at the QBs in that range, and he's in the same range as Ryan Tannehill, Jared Goff, Mac Jones, Carson Wentz. I mean, it's just far too cheap. And again, this game should be a blowout, so it should be a shootout. So Derek Carr could throw for 3 or 4, or even 5 touchdowns, 300 yards, and you're getting him at 4,000 cheaper than an elite QB, and he can put up similar numbers. I mean, that's just great value, I think. And the beauty about picking Herbert or Carr is you've got a lot of options you can play them with. So at wide receiver, Keenan Allen, he's been a stud for a number of years. He is getting on in age, but he's still going to be a good player. Devontae Adams, I think that price is pretty criminal. We saw him, I think he was around 15,000 last year. He's got the connection with Derek Carr. They played together in college at Fresno State. And yeah, I'm very surprised that he came in at that price point. And then probably the guy that I'm hottest on just in general is Mike Williams. I think he can have an absolutely massive year with Herbert. He could usurp Keenan Allen as the number one wide receiver. He has his boom weeks, he has his bust weeks, and that makes him perfect for Draftstars because he can put up a 30, 40-point game and he can really propel your lineup to a massive score. So I'm pretty much, if I'm going Herbert or if I'm going Carr, I'm almost certainly picking Adams and Williams. I don't mind sprinkling a bit of Keenan Allen in there as the other part of the stack. Other players you could go for, I'm not really keen on Hunter Renfrow or Josh Palmer. Renfrow obviously has to deal with the arrival of Devontae Adams and probably less targets. I don't think there's enough targets to go around for Joshua Palmer. But there are a couple of tight ends that interest me. Darren Waller, I'm not sure if he's going to bounce back or not this season. He was poor last year. But I think at the 10K mark, he is capable of putting up a really big game. And then you've also got Gerald Everett, 1,500 above basement price. Last year, I was picking a lot of Jared Cook in my lineup. He was getting utilized as the tight end in the LA Chargers offense. And I don't see why Gerald Everett wouldn't be the same. I think he will start to creep up in price in weeks. He'll be a touchdown threat. And I'm pretty happy to plug him in at 6K. The other player that is playable is Austin Eckler. And he's one of those rare guys that you could stack with his quarterback because a lot of his production does come from passing rather than rushing. So you could go a Herbert and Eckler stack. Or alternatively, you could go Eckler and Derek Carr. I think that would be a fairly nice complement. You're obviously paying up a fair bit, 17K. I think just on a pure head-to-head level, I would prefer to take Jonathan Taylor. But once again, you're building stacks, so you're building as if this game is going to be the blowout game. So I wouldn't have any hesitation in picking Eckler inside a Vegas or Chargers stack. So now that I've rambled on about my favorite stacks, I'm going to try and go through fairly quickly my favorite value per position. So I'm going to leave out the quarterbacks because really the only quarterbacks I'm picking are the ones that I'm going to stack with. The only exception might be a Davis Mills, where I almost sacrifice that position and try and build big everywhere else. And I guess I could probably argue the same for Derek Carr as well. I think he's cheap enough. But if I'm picking Derek Carr, I probably still want to be picking Mike Williams and Devontae Adams. So forget about that. I think I still just want to stack Vegas and Chargers rather than just have Derek Carr sitting on his lonesome. Running backs, I'm going to look at the guys above 10K first. So I think, so my fifth favorite is DeAndre Swift. That's a game with a big high total. They will be behind, but DeAndre Swift does get a lot of passing work. He's a bit cheaper than the other premium running backs, can produce on a similar level to them. Fourth best, I've got Alvin Kamara. I think he is being slept on a little bit. We know that he has the allegations. The allegations, and will be visiting a courtroom at some point in the future. But while he's on the football field, he's still going to score points. He's still going to be a beacon of that New Orleans offense, and he is capable of putting up monster scores. The third one is Dalvin Cook. I think he comes in very underpriced here. I wouldn't want to play him with Kirk Cousins, because if Kirk Cousins is going to score a lot, then it probably means that Dalvin Cook isn't going to score as much. But I think as a standalone option, Dalvin Cook is a good player. Might get some work on passing downs. I did mention earlier that the Vikings do want to go to a more pass-heavy offense. It doesn't worry me too much, because while the amount of Dalvin Cook touches might go down, the value of those touches will go up. So it means more of your touches will be around the red zone or goal line area rather than between the 20s. So I think Dalvin Cook, he comes in pretty underpriced here. And then my two favorites are the two big dogs, Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey. If you're doing drafts, you know that these boys both go off the board 1 and 2. Christian McCaffrey, he's just capable of breaking a week open at any time, any matchup, anywhere. And in seasons past, I've seen him at 20K. I think that a lot of the Carolina offense will go through McCaffrey, both running and receiving. And he's just, if I had to pick a player that I think can get the highest possible score, it would be Christian McCaffrey. Not far behind him, though, is Jonathan Taylor. I mentioned him earlier when I was talking about the Houston and Colts stacks. But yeah, he has blown up both times he's played Houston last year. Plays them week 1 again. He could very well blow up again. Houston, I don't think, have gotten that much better. And he could have a really explosive week. Onto the cheap running backs. So I'm looking at guys that are... I should probably mention Travis Etienne as well, because I think he could burst onto the scene with Trevor Lawrence. He's not in that primo category, but he's kind of like, if I had a couple of K to spare and I needed to upgrade a cheap running back to a decent-ish one, I think Etienne could deliver. Obviously has that connection with Trevor Lawrence. For the cheap guys, my fifth favorite is David Montgomery. There has been some talk that Khalil Herbert would eat into his work. I still think David Montgomery is the number one guy. He's playing in a bad team that probably shouldn't be running the ball a lot, but they still might. So I think under 10K, he could be worth a shot. The fourth one, I'm going to have to filter because this is the 8K guy I mentioned before. And that is Dameon Pierce. So it is going to be likely to be a committee where Dameon Pierce gets a lot of the running work, Rex Burkhead gets the receiving work. But Dameon Pierce, he's flashed some he's flashed his talent in the preseason. It might be a little bit early to be jumping on him from a draft starts perspective, but he's got the talent. He could be worth a punt. The third best option, kind of cheating a bit, but this is a group of players. It's the Baltimore Ravens in a matchup where they're favorites. We don't know what's happening with J.K. Dobbins. If he's gonna, we need to see news reports leading up to the game. If he's going to be the undisputed number one guy, then he will smash that value at 8,600, only just above basement price. But there are some doubts. Maybe he gets eased back into the season, coming back from his ACL. They did sign Mike Davis. They did sign Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake at 5K. I did not notice that before. That could be interesting. But yeah, we need to see what news comes out about the Ravens. It could be a Dobbins-Davis committee. It could be Dobbins taking all the workload. It could be a Davis-Kenyon-Drake committee. No one really knows at this point. Monitor up until the game. I'm probably taking J.K. Dobbins if there are positive reports about his health, because that has been a bit sketchy. But otherwise, it's probably an avoid. Second best option, this is a guy I'm really high on. It is Ramondre Stevenson. All the reports coming out of New England, there haven't been a lot of positive reports there, but the ones that have been positive, they have been hyping up Ramondre Stevenson. There was some talk that Ty Montgomery, who was listed as a wide receiver, could get some third down work, but I think Ramondre is too talented to concede that. It seems like it's going to be a split between Ramondre and Damian Harris at the start of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if Stevenson gets the bulk of the work, considering the talent and the hype that's been around him. So I do prefer him over Damian Harris. If it is a 50-50 split, then Ramondre should get passing down work, which would obviously make him a bit more valuable than Damian Harris. And then my number one guy, I mentioned him before, A.J. Dillon. The floor is there. He will get, even with Aaron Jones active, he will get a ton of touches, will get a lot of running work. And yeah, he's got the solid floor, but I think he's also got the upside to score a couple of touchdowns in a high-scoring game. And I'm smashing him at that value of 9,270. Premium wide receivers will go onto those now. My fifth favorite is Rashad Bateman, 10,600. It really depends on your perception of Lamar. A lot of people are either really in on Lamar or really out on Lamar. And mentioning the Ravens running back room problems, especially if J.K. Dobbins doesn't get up, I think they will end up on the same trajectory as last year, where Lamar has to throw the ball a lot more. And that makes both Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews values, in my opinion, coming in at under 11,000. Fourth best is Brandon Cooks. Again, I mentioned him before. He's been a top 20 wide receiver most seasons. Again, at that 10,500, so you're not breaking the bank to get him, but he is capable of putting up solid weeks. Third one I also mentioned before in a shootout game, that is Devontae Adams. Comes in a couple of thousand under, or about 1,000 under what I would have expected. Has that chemistry with Derek Carr and will be the number one passing option on a high-scoring offense. Second favorite, if you can fit him in, get him in, it's Justin Jefferson. Highly rate this guy. He was top 3 wide receiver last year on an offense that is supposed to be passing more. And Adam Thielen is getting older, so he's clearly the one in that offense. He could absolutely explode this year. And then I couldn't go past my guy at number 1, Mike Williams. I think he's a genuine chance of being the number 1 in Los Angeles this year. And I think at 12,300, if you look at the guys around him, it's just, I think he outdoes T. Higgins. I think he outdoes Michael Pittman, AJ Brown, Debo Samuel. Just a very good option in a high scoring game. He's got the ceiling, so he can be boom or bust, but he's got a massive ceiling, and I'm hoping that he carries me to a couple of top 10 finishes this week. The cheap wide receivers. So these are the guys that are under 10,000. My fifth favorite is Elijah Moore. There are some questions I have because Joe Flacco will be starting quarterback most likely. I still think Elijah Moore can produce a decent game. And maybe there is a scenario, well, they will be behind most of the game, so you would expect them to have to throw the ball a lot, and that should lead to Elijah Moore production. They did draft Garrett Wilson, but I'm expecting Elijah Moore to be the clear number one in that offense. They've also got Braxton Berrios, but he is more of a punt guy and also a international sex icon. So Elijah Moore is a pretty solid pick there. My fourth favorite is Marcus Valdes-Scantling. I think he can be the number one in Kansas City. Obviously, excluding Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce is just going to eat this year with all the targets he's given. But I think the second guy will be Valdes-Scantling. Someone has to get those targets that Tyreek Hill was getting. The Kansas City running game, it's not it. So a lot of people are projecting that guy to be Juju. I think it's going to be Valdes-Scantling. Third favorite is Sammy Watkins. Again, if Alan Lazard doesn't play, I think he's probably my favorite option. But even still, if Lazard does play, Sammy Watkins is Aaron Rodgers' second passing option. I think he can eat at that price. He has given us some big games before, and yeah, nothing more to say about that. Second favorite is Brandon Ayuk. He was in the doghouse last year with Kyle Shanahan, but it seems like he's escaped that doghouse and is going to be the number two option. You do wonder how much Trey Lance is going to throw the ball, but at 9K for Ayuk, I'm pretty happy taking that price and taking the risk. And then my number one option is Darnell Mooney, which may be a little bit controversial, but he has the talent. He's the clear number one target on that offense. They're going to be behind early, so he should get fed while they try and come back and fail miserably. But I still, just because it's a bad team doesn't mean he can't score. And looking at the back half of 2020, he scored well. Onto tight ends. My fifth favorite is Robert Tonyan. I think it's more of a play if Lazard is out, but still at that 5K, it is salary relief. If he gets one touchdown, even one reception, one touchdown at that price, you're winning out overall. I think he can get a few receptions and some yards as well, so might not even need the touchdown to be valuable. 5K, he is my favorite of the cheap guys. My fourth favorite is Zach Ertz. So Kyler Murray was throwing to DeAndre Hopkins last year. He does get Hollywood Brown as kind of a replacement. But Zach Ertz, if he is fit, because he is questionable, I think still will have a lot of targets this game. A red zone threat as well. He's capable, and it's a high-scoring matchup as well, so he's very capable of putting up a decent score or better than decent. My third option will be Mark Andrews. Again, I think Baltimore have to move towards that passing offense again, especially if J.K. Dobbins is injured. I think they were the 8th most pass-happy team last year, so And with Hollywood leaving from Baltimore to Arizona, that gives that basically leaves Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman as the only two guys. So I like both of them as fantasy options this year. I actually just did a draft where I picked all three of them. I have Lamar, I have Mark Andrews, and I have Rashad Bateman. So maybe there is a little bit of bias creeping in here, but I still like Mark Andrews at that price. I think he's a real contender to be the top tight end for the year. And he comes in a couple of thousand under Kelsey, who is a decent option in his own right, but I'm going to take the value on Mark Andrews this week and spend the $2,000 elsewhere. Second best option, I think he's flying under the radar a bit. Plays for Tennessee. It's Austin Hooper. Tennessee, they don't throw the ball that much, but in saying that, their main guy, A.J. Brown, just left to go to the Eagles. And so someone has to fill that void. And they did draft Treylon Burks, who was supposed to be the guy who was basically, his draft profile was that he was the next A.J. Brown. But it sounds like he's going to take a lot of time to develop. So that leaves Nick Westbrook-Akina, who was the number 2 at times in Tennessee and just didn't produce. Got Robert Woods, who's 30, coming back from an ACL. He could be value at that price, but I'm just not sure how well he produces. And then you've got Austin Hooper, who, he's a solid tight end. He's definitely not outstanding, but he is solid. And I think he could be a favorite target of Tannehill's this year. And coming in at 7,700, you're getting him fairly cheap. Who else is around that price range? You've got Njoku, Irv Smith, Cole Kmet. I think Austin Hooper could be a nice sneaky pod there. Definitely someone I will target a little bit. And the number one tight end I want is Gerald Everett. It's only 1,500 over the basement price, but he should see a lot of targets in a high scoring offense. Will be a red zone threat. I think the price on Gerald Everett is a couple of thousand under what it needs to be. He's definitely a contender to have a good week. And then finally, onto the last position. Everyone's favorite position, DST. Normally, my philosophy is if there's an obvious option to pay up, then I do tend to pay up. But I think there is some value, and honestly, if you like a team's defense, go for it. DST can be very volatile, but I will try and pick out 5 options that I like the most. And then I look forward to looking back on this and seeing that 4 of the 5 flopped, and there was one that I missed out that was that ended up having an amazing week. My 5th favorite at a little bit of value is the New England Patriots. Their new head coach said they want to run the ball a lot, which will lead to a slower game script. But when they do throw the ball, they've got Tua there. He does have a new target in Tyreek Hill, but I still think he could be prone to an interception or two. Not sure. We've seen, according to Twitter, the chemistry is there. I want to see it on the football field first. I think the Patriots, they have been an elite DST in the past, and they could have a decent week this week. 4th favorite is the New Orleans Saints coming up against Atlanta. Atlanta have Marcus Mariota at quarterback. So that could be a few interceptions. They're expected to be behind, so Mariota will obviously have to throw the ball a lot more. Could take sacks. And the Saints are just very solid. They're a solid defense in what will be a favorable matchup. So there are some more expensive options that might be a bit better than them, but I don't mind the Saints at that price tag. 3rd favorite is the Eagles. which is kind of hard to say because I have been watching Hard Knocks and it's hard not to get swept up in that Detroit Lion hype. But they've still got Jared Goff under center. And just when I was watching Goff last year, there's just times where he's making really poor decisions, had fumbles as well. And in that game against the Eagles last year, I think Detroit got shut out as well at home. The Eagles have added some pieces onto defense as well. I think at a kind of middling price point, they could be one of the best DSTs for this weekend. That's probably my favorite out of the value DSTs. Next, my second favorite, if you can pay up for them, is the Tennessee Titans. They've obviously lost a lot on offense this year, but they have added a fair bit to defense. And just quietly, I think their defense was a bit underrated last year. They're coming up against Daniel Jones, who has been prone to fumbling, has been prone to throwing interceptions, has been prone to taking unnecessary sacks. And although they are the most expensive defense on the slate, they are the most expensive for a reason. I think they are a very solid option to be able to plug in there. And my favorite option is the 49ers. The Bears, Justin Fields, another one that's prone to taking a lot of sacks, doesn't really have much of an offensive line, and 49ers have got a very good pass rush. So I think they're just going to have Justin Fields under a ton of pressure all game, taking a ton of sacks. And yeah, I think the 49ers are primed for a big week in DST world. So that's everything. This video's gone a lot longer than I hoped it would, but I hope that you've taken something from it and it helps you in building your lineups. I will try and post a video next week, depending on the reception that this video gets. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and a comment down below. Hopefully I can guide your teams into second and third place while I take the top, but if someone watches this and gets top, I'll be very happy for you and happy to take the credit. So I'll catch you next time. Thanks very much for watching.